All right, let's watch one more at least. This is from XGR, Extreme G Racing's YouTube channel. So in case you guys didn't know, because I didn't until one of you guys posted in React requests, they're still under 1,000 subs, just under 1,000 subs. 50 more to get them to 1,000, so let's try and help them. I post a link there. Get subscribed to this channel if you guys are interested in racing. This is titled, "We Need Racing Shields." And I've been speaking about this for a very long time. And I absolutely agree. Let's see what they have to say.
It's so frustrating as a racer to put so many hours practicing for a race and, you know, just to get hit by another racer. And it's not necessarily their fault. Our field.
I mean, that happens in Formula One, right? It's just like, to no fault of their own, somebody gets knocked out, right? Fernando Alonso constantly getting Lance Strolled off the racetrack. You know what I mean? What can you do? Lance Stroll's on the grid. You're going to get knocked into. He's going to crash into something.
The views are out of whack when we're, you know, rolled 90 degrees or, you know, desync issues or whatever it may be.
Turn one chaos.
And it also kind of sucks as a spectator. Yes, you'll see a cool explosion, but is that better versus getting to see racers continuing to battle it out throughout the race? I think the latter. It'd be really cool to see, you know, two racers accidentally rub up against each other, and then maybe one racer like loses a couple seconds because they're slightly off track, but then they're fighting their way back and trying to overtake the person that bumped into them. It'd be really cool if we had racing shields or racing armor or something to just mitigate the instant explosions that happen
right
when
there.
we just barely touch each other. It's just so demoralizing as a racer.
I think we've been raving about racing shields for the longest time. We've got it in our Discord banner. I've talked about it since forever. And I think most people will agree that one way or another, we should be able to have a bump here and there and keep racing. There was
Yeah, and I don't think it necessarily means racing shields. Like, I think about this a lot. It isn't just racing. It is everything. Have you ever been rammed in PvP? Have you ever been pad rammed? Right? Like, I think this is a general Star Citizen problem and not a racing problem. Right? The fact that we can collide into each other and blow each other up is insane. Right now, at least. I think, like, I've talked to PvPers who think it's an actual legitimate strategy sometimes. I don't buy that, but I don't engage in PvP very much. So I don't know how much weight my opinion really matters there. And same with racing. I don't race, right? I would like to more, and I probably will in Arena Commander, but more along the lines of like the punishment for collisions, it should be lap time, but at the same time, like, I do watch a lot of Formula One, and it is part of the game. It is part of the racing, is that collisions happen, and when they do, you're usually out of your race. But I think that's why it's like more of a general game problem, and we don't need racing shields. We need to figure out a way on how to properly deal with player-to-player collisions, and even collisions of environment to player. For example, dropping a box on your ship blows it up a lot. Soft death ships, trying to remove cargo from a soft death ship, impossible sometimes. Right? So it's a interesting one.
a small moment where we accidentally were invulnerable while flying in the safety zones. It was amazing, like being able to just hit the wall and just keep going. And look at the M50 commercial, you know, we're showing it on stream right now as well. it is so cool to see these guys clip together. You see the M50 kind of like spin out of control, and that's exactly what you mean, I think, Shaqnu, when you talk about losing a few seconds. Like, I would love nothing more than to be able to say, oh no, they came together, they're spinning out of control, and now the guy in third place is going to take the lead, but the other guys still get to keep going. It shouldn't be.
And if this happens in PvP as well sometimes, when there isn't an explosion, the idea of you're getting, sometimes you get into a spin and you're now vulnerable to being shot at, right? It does affect the pip a lot, unfortunately, so it makes it a little bit harder to aim. But yeah, I think I'd like to see more of that in Star Citizen, but I do agree in chat, like, just hit the wall and go is an interesting one. Should you just be able to go? I think what Star Citizen really needs is a way better damage system, and not like this ship health system. Or ships should have significantly more health before soft death, or after soft death or something. I don't know. I think that there's a lot to unpack here and a lot to break down in terms of like this. I don't think this is just a racing problem, but I think damage is an interesting one. I just think ships die too quickly, period. Ships should be in a state of disrepair or extremely problematic for the pilot, which is, you know, soft death is a great example of a really great thing that Star Citizen did. Implementation so far really problematic though. But I think that's where we're going, is more of a damage-based system and not this health-based system. And the moment they change that, no, I don't think we need racing shields. You're going to lose your wing and you're going to lose time, and you can pit for a new wing, right? That's what we need.
Always possible, and like you can slam into the wall at, you know, at insane speeds, but it would be so cool if it wasn't this punishing.
Yeah, absolutely. For small taps like this, the racing shields should definitely be able to keep us alive, or even soft.
But I think this is an example of why these like very focused Star Citizen communities can sometimes be a problem. Is they got blinders on, right? Like, we need racing shields. No, we don't. The whole game needs racing shields. Right, and I mentioned this all came to my mind during this video, is I always advocated for racing shields, and then I realized, like, because I've tried to touch every aspect of the game as much as I possibly can to keep myself interested, because that's unfortunately what being a Star Citizen streamer is it is mostly uninteresting. So trying to engage with as much as possible and keep things as interesting for yourself and for the people watching you means that you don't really get to sit there and like just grind the one thing that you love the most. Like, I like mining and cargo hauling. I can't do that every single day. Otherwise, everybody leaves and it's boring. And then streaming isn't boring. So because of that, you know, I recognize that this isn't just a racing problem. And like, you know, he's saying, oh, well, that racing shields will fix that. Bro, they have to fix the whole game. Fix the game. And then your racing will improve. So you got to get out of your bubble a little bit here, XGR. Like, you've done great things. I love these guys, what they've done for the Star Citizen community. And again, I always praise these guys as much as I possibly can, but this is extremely echo chambery, and it is a wider game problem, and racing shields are not the solution. Racing ships, because here's what ends up happening is racing shields are a thing, then your PvPers are no longer gonna be flying combat ships. They're going to be flying racing ships, and then they're going to be slamming into ships without racing shields, and then they're going to win fights by slamming into each other. Okay? So the one that doesn't have the racing shield loses. We have to think about the larger game here. Yeah, the ramming meta is going to become a thing. So the larger game needs to treat everybody the same, and the damage model needs to be addressed. And what XGR has to recognize now is that you got a little taste. They gave you a little spoonful of love when you need a whole plate of love. And guess what? The priority is probably not on you anymore. It's on somebody else. And right now, the community that's starving is ship combat and PvP communities, because their master modes, their weapon balance, their ship different capabilities have been in work in progress for 2-3 years now. So, you know, XGR and these guys got spoon-fed for a really long time, right? Or for a really short time, I should say, but more recently, while the PvP community was given all the juice for a while. Miners got it this patch. Who's next? I don't think what's next should be dedicated racing shields. I think we need to focus on the biggest picture things in the game and get them working right. Yeah, probably cargo is next. But the biggest picture stuff needs to be the focus. And if they focus on the biggest picture stuff, they're going to get this right for racers as well, right? So just, you know, stay out of your echo chamber as much as you can and think about the wider game. And then what you realize is when you do that is, unfortunately, because it touches so many things and because it's such a big feature, it's going to take a while and you're going to have to deal with your problems for a really long time.
Death,
unfortunately,
if the speed delta is high enough. But yeah, we'll see how it goes. Hopefully it's something that CIG.
But then again, these guys have probably direct contact with some devs, and maybe they're making some things happen.
Is considering to add racing shield or something
Pray
like
to
that.
Chris Roberts, everybody.
Lord knows I can't make anything happen.
I honestly
talk to the
don't
devs all
feel
the
like
time.
it's in the cards right now, and I think it's up to everybody to change CIG's mind. I don't think we know where they are with the plans of the future, but I just personally feel like they're not planning for these kinds of shields.
They're not, because they're planning on doing a better system in the first place. Now, if CIG can do a Band-Aid fix for them in some way, shape, or form that doesn't affect the larger game, like PvP stuff, I'm all for it. Again, I am very much for quick and easy Band-Aid fixes. If they can find one, I'm for it. Like in Arena Commander racing mode only is the only place you can equip these shields. Would we be cool with that? I would. Or collisions turned off in Arena Commander racing modes. Just turn it off. Right? I think that's a probably a good middle ground solution for these guys for now, until CIG makes it better. No, you can't race in the PU that way because it has too large of an effect on everyone else. But I would like to see that maybe.
But I hope we can convince them with our racing and by bitching about the punishment, the severe punishment, that we put this in their mind.
There's a bunch of different ways to go about it too that doesn't even need like really specific, lots of work effort stuff. I see the point that a lot of people bring up, well, what about ramming? That's supposed to be viable for PvP, and they bring up all these other concerns, but there's ways to do this that will help out the racing scene by a whole lot and not negatively impact PvP.
So tell me them. Tell me them. I'd love to know.
Like there's a lot of options on the table. So, like you had talked specifically racing shields. We can have some specific ship-to-ship shield that's only viable on very small, like racing style ships. There's ways that you could do it to where it's very small mitigation for like low impact crashes, but high impact stuff is going to do a lot more damage, similar to what it does now.
But boxes are considered high impact.
The limiting like of larger ships that has no impact, right? Like a lot of times it's not going to be a P-52 ramming somebody to death. It's going to be a PvP style ship or something bigger and stuff like that. So there's lots of ways of avoiding this and focusing it more towards the racing style ships. Even if we could get that to where it's limited to more racer style ships, I'd be totally fine with that. I
feel like there's a really cool way to do it. I've said this before, but I feel like, if you look at Elite Dangerous, they obviously have shields that they impact both incoming damage and collisions.
Isn't ramming a huge tactic in Elite Dangerous PvP?
Star Citizen isn't about that. they could choose to have shields that do either or, right? So like I can imagine that not everybody is interested in combat or protecting themselves from combat, but people might want to protect their precious cargo from gentle collisions. Like imagine the whole sea coming into land, or you know, it's trying to dock up somewhere. Imagine that they could protect against collisions instead of you know, these high energy projectiles. And so you could protect your cargo by doing that, or tying it in to QCM and SCM, which is coming in the future. Like hell, imagine if your shield would stop projectile fire in SCM, which is the combat mode, right? And it would stop collisions in QCM. Another way, you know, like I'm just thinking about how to maybe tie it into mode switches or something.
I think that's a pretty reasonable solution there, and that would go across the game wide. I think this guy is saying, well, what about ramming, and not really going deep enough into why or why not that couldn't happen, like high impact collisions versus low impact collisions and all these things. I mean, yeah, it could work, but I think that probably is a. Does the server know when you're like? The reason you die, like there is low impact collisions and there are high impact collisions in the game. Now, the reason you're dying in like turn 1 of one of your races is because the game thinks you had a high impact collision when you probably didn't even, right?
Something like that. I feel definitely there's ways to come up with cool ideas.
All right. Well, I mean, that was that. I didn't know the video was ending there. I thought they were going into some more. But that's my feelings on it, is I think that they're very focused on what they're interested in and not focused enough on the larger game. And even though they sort of addressed my issue with ramming and how it might affect the rest of the game, I'm sure that there are ways to do this. But I think the one thing I really have to point out is that CIG bounces their priorities around, and I don't know if racing is going to maintain its priority in the Star Citizen community as much as people at XGR might want it to. If the game is ever to get finished, they can't dedicate that much time to things like this. So if they, you know, just simply turn off collision in Arena Commander, where you're going to get the best frames, where you're going to be able to group up together and have hopefully the least amount of desync and things like that, I think that's where XGR is going to be doing most of their content over the next few years, most likely, right? At least until server meshing is stabilized, and optimized. You're, you know, in the way that they tell us, then yeah, I don't see myself not wanting things to be game-wide and not just focused on specific communities, right? I think that's really, really problematic. And yeah, I mean, again, love the XGR guys, love what they've done, good on them, but there's no way it should stay this way. No way.